right, so we'll get started. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to this TASS Zero Emissions Day webinar on solar energy in schools in the UAE. We had over 100 registrations from 35 schools in 13 countries. So we were really thrilled to see, so much interest in this topic. Just to give you a quick introduction to who we are, my name is Mashal. I'll be moderating today's session. I'm joined by my colleague, Anthony Dixon, who's also the founder and chairman of the Alliance for Sustainable Schools. The Alliance for Sustainable Schools is an international nonprofit network of schools working together to help accelerate the transition to a sustainable future. As a community of practice, our aim is to connect sustainability practitioners in schools around the world to share their learnings and amplify their impact. We're also an agent of change with the mission to catalyze systems change in 5 key areas: school buses, school buildings, school food, school uniforms, and education for sustainability. Today's webinar addresses our school buildings pillar, and more specifically, we will be talking about the contribution that solar energy can make to the sustainability of school buildings and campus operations. With that said, please allow me to introduce to you some of our esteemed speakers. We have Balsam, the board member of the Emirates Green Building Council and Director of Sustainability at DAR. We have Sophia from Yellow Door Energy. We have Alex, Head of Operations at Swiss International Scientific School, or SISD, as well as Gul, the Assistant Head at SISD. In the next 60 to 75 minutes, our speakers will cover the following topics. We will go through an introduction to Zero Emissions Day and the contribution of solar, the potential of solar in schools, how it works in practice, and a case study on the practical and educational benefits of installing solar in schools by SISD. This webinar is being recorded. Just a reminder to please keep yourselves on mute and feel free to leave any thoughts and questions in the chat box. We will have a Q&A session towards the end of the presentation. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Balsam from Emirates Green Building Council to kick off the webinar. Thank you, Balsam.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to be representing the Emirates Green Building Council as a board member and a partner to the council. Really, we are taking this opportunity today to speak about zero emissions, to speak about the importance of solar, about the UAE agenda and the role of schools in supporting net zero targets. And starting off with, what is Zero Emissions Day? So September 21st, just a few days back, is Zero Emission Day, or what is also known as D-Day. Now, the story says that back in the 1980s, a graphic designer, Ken Wallace, was walking outside of his home with his daughter, and he did notice vehicles that are idle, not moving. And he did come up with a very smart idea to give that day the name of Earth Day as a day free from fossil fuel emissions. Now, fossil fuel emissions are the main reason of our global warming. And through the Paris Agreement, there has been a discussion and an agreement to really get to limit the global warming potential to no more than 1.5 degrees C as an increment to pre-industrial levels. What does that mean specifically? It means that we'll need to reduce our emissions. Each and every single one of us would need to reduce their emissions to get to an initial target of 45% reduction by 2030, and then a final ultimate target, which is net zero emissions by 2050. And this is quite important for us. It's important for us today as advocates of this. It's important for us every day as we are aligning and getting ourselves ready to meet those challenging goals and align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, whether it comes through economic growth, it comes through building for sustainable cities, it comes through responsible consumption and production, or also climate action and the importance of this starting from schools and moving to the wider built environment. If we move to the next slide and we zoom in onto the UAE's mission and agenda for net zero, we notice that the UAE has been on a strategic mission to get to net zero by 2050, making the Emirates really the first Middle Eastern and North African nation to do so. This initiative obviously strongly aligns with the Paris Agreement, and it calls on countries to prepare the long-term strategies to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and to limit and contribute to the 1.5, just limited increment above pre-industrial level. Now, the UAE has been on this pre-COP28, during COP28, and has had a much stronger drive also post-COP28 and as we speak today. And one of the most important pillars of this net zero agenda is the deployment and the use of the clean energy solutions. The country started financing clean energy projects 15 years ago. It has invested so far 40 billion US dollars in this sector. And if we see the current trends, especially of solar, is that the total clean energy production is expected to reach 14 gigawatt by 2030. And just by way of comparison, it was 100 megawatt in 2015. It was 2.5 gigawatt in 2020. So it's about 5.5 increment in just a decade. Moving on to the next slide and really looking at the importance of the Emirates Green Building Council. So as a council, and I can proudly say that it's one of the strongest, most active councils in the region that is really strongly supporting and driving the agenda of the UAE and strongly influencing other councils. It has been very active since 2006. It did have a significant efforts that has improved awareness, accomplishments, and really milestones in terms of sustainability, in terms of how to get to net zero, and has supported the UAE through its green economy principles. And as a catalyst for sustainability, Emirates Green Building Council has recorded groundbreaking initiatives that has really helped, let's say, the rapid decarbonization of buildings in the UAE, including schools in specific. There is a vision within the Emirates Green Building Council that came through the Emirates Coalition for Green Schools, and that is also to ensure that every child in the UAE is able to learn in a green school within this generation. And would like to invite you to visit the Emirates Green Building Council website and learn more about the efforts that are being done when it comes to net zero and the roles of school in this. Moving on to the next slide, and zooming really into buildings. So the built environment itself, if we look at the pie chart on the left, is responsible for about 50% of our carbon emissions. And starting with really addressing the building sector from the built environment would by itself help mitigate 50% of our carbon emissions if we are to leave aside industrial sectors and transportation sectors. Next, please. So what does it mean? What does it mean to decarbonize the built environment? It means that we need to be getting on the road to getting to net zero. And this is through a sequential approach. For it to be successful, for it to be with a limited, let's say, budget, and for it to be investing in the low-hanging fruits, it has to be through a sequential approach. This approach starts through the passive design strategies. You might be familiar with optimizing orientations of buildings, the external shading, their glazing distribution, where and when and how much to add insulation, how to harvest natural daylight rather than relying on artificial lighting fixtures and so on. And then supplementing this with active strategies through efficient AC systems, ventilation systems, lighting systems, and then the motors that all operate our buildings. And then after having reduced our power consumption and our peak load demand is the importance of then considering the renewable energy integration, specifically through solar PV. Next, please. So why is solar energy quite important, and why is it important in all buildings, including schools in specific? We are in a climate where we have abundant sunshine. And as consultants, we have investigated multiple forms and shapes of energy, of renewable energy, of clean energy, and solar has always been a winner. It is a winner because it helps you offset your hot water demands with solar thermal panels. It is a winner because it helps you generate power and clean electricity through integration of solar panels at rooftops. Currently, we see the most efficient PV panels with efficiencies around 22% as being the dark colored PV, but the industry is really moving forward in terms of vertical building integrated PV that match your glazing components and so on. And then there is also the opportunity, and only where land permits and land is available, to offset by means of solar ground-mounted PV through solar farms. Next, please. So having presented this, it's important really to finish off before I hand it back to Anthony with a quote that says that our biggest challenge during this new century is to acquire a thought that seems abstract, which is sustainable development, and switch it into a reality for all the world's people. And what better than to start with this road to net zero from schools and green schools and the integration of sustainability within our schools, part of a sustainable development and part of decarbonizing our built environment. Anthony, over to you.
Thank you very much, Balsam, for those remarks, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to begin by showing you some examples of inspiring solar projects in schools around the world. When it comes to solar on buildings, most people immediately think about installing solar on the roof, but rooftops are only one option. So my purpose in highlighting the following examples is to point out a variety of ways that solar can be deployed on buildings, as well as some new technology that makes solar no longer merely functional, but also an aesthetic architectural feature. So let's start with a couple of solar rooftop examples. This slide depicts one of the most futuristic looking school buildings you've probably ever seen, but made all the more so, I think, by the fact that it's covered in solar. This is King's Al Barsha School in Dubai, and its 4,900 solar panels have a capacity of 1,900 kilowatts, making it one of the largest solar projects on a school anywhere in the Middle East. The next example on the next slide is the rooftop solar installation at the Canadian International School in Hong Kong. Due to the roof's location and its structure, it couldn't be used as a community space or to place heavy building service equipment, but it's a large area and it's completely free of shading from nearby buildings, making it perfect for solar. This installation has a capacity of about 100 kilowatts. In both of these cases, the schools happen to have a lot of available roof space that wasn't being used, but in many cases, the available roof space is limited, either by the shape of the building or by the fact that the roof space is taken up already with cooling and other building services equipment. Fortunately, rooftops are not the only option for installing solar. This is the solar carport at the Royal Grammar School, Guildford in Dubai. Car parks, as you know, often occupy very large areas, and installing solar canopies over them can not only provide significant amounts of clean electricity, but also the added benefit of shade. And we'll hear more about solar carports from Alex at SISD later in the webinar. Solar canopies, solar facades, next slide please, are a frequently overlooked opportunity to install solar on buildings. This is a school in Los Angeles. Although the vertical angle of a solar facade results in lower electricity output per square meter, the area available on walls is often much greater than on rooftops, which compensates for the lower output. In this case, the south facade of the school is clad with 650 solar panels that provide 75% of the school's electricity needs. Next slide shows Dulwich College's Singapore's new building called the Greenhouse. It showcases on the left-hand side of this slide the semi-transparent solar modules which provide shading for a roof terrace that would otherwise be far too hot for people to use for most months of the year. The greenhouse also demonstrates an interesting way to mount solar on a facade. As you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, the solar panels are angled rather than mounted flush against the wall. This increases their electricity generation and also means they double as shading for the windows, reducing the need for cooling in the adjacent classrooms. An objection that we sometimes hear from school building committees or architects about the idea of putting solar on walls is that they don't like the look of them. Well, the days of solar panels being only black are well behind us. This beautiful building is the Copenhagen International School in Denmark. The green and blue tiles are in fact 12,000 colored solar panels, and they completely cover the outside of the building on all sides, providing 50% of the school's electricity needs. In fact, solar modules can be made in almost any color. Next slide, please. Even white. That building on the far right of this slide has white solar panels on the front wall. None of these buildings on this slide are schools, but I've included them to demonstrate the color options that are becoming popular. And finally, next slide, there is the prospect of transparent solar cells becoming a commercial reality in the next 5 years or so. And that means that windows too in buildings can be sources of clean electricity. Before I hand over to Sophia, I want to provide a little bit of context for the big picture. It's fair to say that this century is shaping up to be the solar century. For the past 20 years, solar has expanded an average of 16% annually. And last year, it was the fastest growing source of new electricity, far outpacing wind and all forms of fossil energy in terms of new capacity additions. Solar has also become the cheapest source of electricity, next slide, almost everywhere in the world, thanks to exponential declines in the cost of solar modules over the last 50 years, and a positive feedback loop. The more it is used, the cheaper it becomes. So in the UAE in particular, as the next slide shows, solar energy is abundant and cheap. The MENA region in general receives a quarter of all the solar radiation in the world. And the cost of producing solar in the region is 1/5 of the global average. Next slide. But despite this, the region is home to less than 5% of all the solar deployed in the world. So its potential remains largely untapped. This is also the case in schools. TASS's research indicates, next slide, that only about 2% of all the schools in the UAE have installed solar so far. Those that do have solar generate about 28 million kilowatt hours every year, which provides between 25% and 70% of a school's electricity needs individually, and avoids a total of 13,000 tons of CO2 every year. To conclude, I just want to mention, next slide, the rich opportunity that solar in schools offers to equip our students with important knowledge and skills for a sustainable future. Gal from SASD will talk more about that later in the webinar. So with that, I'll hand over to Sophia from Yellow Door Energy to speak about the practical aspects of installing solar on schools in the UAE and how it can be done without incurring any upfront cost, without schools incurring any upfront cost. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. It was very interesting to see the different ways to install solar. And I'll be taking the audience through how to do it in a practical way and how it works specifically in the UAE. So I'll just explain who is Yellow Door Energy and how can we actually evaluate the solar potential of the schools. I'll explain also the different financing options that the school have with the focus on solar leasing and show you some case studies that our company has worked. So a few words about myself. I've been working with Yellow Door Energy for the past 5.5 years. And I work in the commercial and industrial sector, but as a sustainability advocate, I absolutely love the education sector, so I'm very excited to be here today. So Yellow Door Energy is a solar developer focused on commercial and industrial sectors, headquartered in Dubai with operations in other countries such as Saudi, Bahrain, Jordan, Oman, and South Africa. We have over 240 megawatt of solar projects implemented as of today. So just to go back to the basics of solar and see how it works in different applications, I'll just display a short video.
These panels convert sunlight into direct current using the photoelectric effect. An inverter alters the direct current into alternating current or AC electricity. And it is this that enables us to run our air conditioner, fridge, TV set, or any other appliance. You can welcome solar energy into your home via 3 different types of systems. A grid-tied system obtains its reference voltage from the grid. You do not need a battery set, so you can save on extra capital costs and maintenance expenditures. If you're away from home and not using electricity, the energy you produce is sold back to the grid. The meter, known as a net meter, charges you only if you consume more than you produce during the entire month. If you face frequent power cuts, a hybrid system would be the way to go. Batteries can be attached along with a hybrid inverter to provide backup. And finally, people in remote areas can go for an off-grid system that has batteries. They can meet their energy needs without any grid connection.
Thank you, Masha. So in this video, the idea is to explain the different possibilities that we have. But in this presentation, we will focus on the grid type because most of the schools, I would say all the schools in Dubai actually have access to the grid. So the question is, if I'm a school owner or school operator and I want to know how much I can, what is my solar potential, how shall I proceed? The first step is to understand what is the regulation that applies to the school depending on where the school is located. In the UAE, each emirate has a different applicable regulation that people have to be aware of. For all the Dubai-based school, Shams Dubai is the regulation led by DIWA that allows a net metering scheme. And as explained in the video, net metering is actually a scheme that encourages businesses to actually produce energy into their premises and sell any excess back to the grid. However, in the Northern Emirates, so far, we're still waiting for a new release of the regulation. So there is no clarity on the implementation of solar so far. However, we know that Etihad EWI is actually releasing very soon a new regulation in that area. In Abu Dhabi Emirates, so far, the self-consumption applied, and I will explain shortly how it works. So very important first to understand where are we located and what regulation applies. In the second step, we need to get ready with the data. How much does the school consume on an annual basis? How is it connected? So the single line diagram is an electrical drawing that shows how each MDB is connected. What is the total connected load of the facility? If we are outside Dubai, we would need the hourly load profile, which means how does the school consume on an hourly load basis in different months, because in January, the consumption will be different than July, for example. And of course, the facility drawings, the roof drawing, the overall setting layout, and so on. The third step would be for Yellow Door Energy, after receiving the documents, to provide feedback about how much can actually be installed. And most of the time, our engineers actually perform a site visit to collect further data. The last step is actually we are able to provide with a full solar proposal with different options that I will explain later how solar leasing works. And that will also include all the saving calculations and all the benefits that the school will have. Next, please. So we mentioned earlier net metering, and this is applicable so far in Dubai, hopefully very soon in other Emirates. So how it works is the school will be able to generate power out of the green energy that it will be installed. And if there is any excess of energy that can go to the grid through a bi-directional meter that will be installing with DIWA. So the system will be interconnected to the main grid. So whenever solar energy won't be sufficient, the school will be actually consuming from from the utility provider. And if there is any excess, then the solar energy will go through the grid. Usually in Dubai, we see that the solar energy only covers a small percentage of the overall consumption, as Anthony says, usually between 25 to 70%. So there's rarely excess, let's say, to the grid, but that could actually happen during the summer breaks when there is a lower occupancy, right? So net metering is extremely helpful, especially for schools operation. Next, please. So for schools that are not located in Dubai or do not have an applicable net metering or net billing regulation, then self-consumption will apply. What does it mean? It means that we can still install a solar plant, however, that will only cover the energy needs during the sunny hours, so from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Any excess of energy will be curtailed, which means that it will be lost because it cannot flow back to the grid, right? So in this kind of scheme, it's extremely important to size the system in a way that we understand the consumption pattern of the school to make sure that we don't overgenerate. But what are the different financing options for solar project? Well, the first one would be that the school does everything on its own, which is not very realistic, but I would be, in case the school has the expertise to procure and design and build the solar plant on its premises. To be honest, in this market, we rarely see this option. The second option is we call the CapEx option, which means that the school can actually put all the investment upfront and buy the full system, which includes the permitting, but also the installation and so on. However, the school will have to operate on its own, right? The third option is the PPA option that is commonly called the leasing option in the UAE. That's the terminology that we use in this market, which is a build-own transfer model. What does it mean? This means a developer like Yellow Energy will put all the investment upfront required for the solar plant, will take care of the permitting, of the design, of the procurement, the installation, the commissioning, but also the operation and maintenance for the whole duration of the lease. That is a long-term agreement that is usually between 10 and 25 years, where the school will actually pay a monthly bill to pay its solar energy, but won't have to pay the initial upfront investment. So it's a long-term commitment, but takes out all the burden from a financial and operational risk, and that we see that in the next slide. So what are the main differences between the CapEx model and the lease model? As I mentioned before, the first one is that in the leasing model, the school can actually keep its cash to invest it in the core business, right, which is the education, and can leave it or trust a solar partner to take care of all the other scope of work. The difference also is in savings is that in the CapEx model, you have a payback period after buying it. You need to wait for a few years, usually 7-8 years, to be able to recover your investment. Whereas with the leasing model, since you don't pay anything upfront, you start making savings from the first month of operation. The benefit of leasing also is that you have all the operation, maintenance, insurance. So there are a lot of hidden costs that you don't see when you procure CapEx, but that are all embedded into the leasing model. The main difference also is in the ownership. So when you buy CapEx, the system is yours immediately, but then if you go with the leasing, the developer, like Yellow Energy, owns the system, but transfer the ownership of the system after the lease term at no cost. The major difference also is in the performance guarantee. So when you buy the system through an EPC contractor, you have to take the risk on how the system will perform. Whereas with the leasing model, you have a performance guarantee that is embedded into the contract. And if the developer does not meet the guaranteed kilowatt hour expected on a yearly basis, the savings that the school was supposed to make compared to the, let's say, the DUA tariff will be reimbursed. So the savings are guaranteed through the entire duration of the lease. We're talking about sometimes 20, 25 years. Next, please. So how does it work for the solar leasing? Usually both parties, so the developer, in this case, Yellow Door Energy, and the school sign an agreement. As I mentioned, could be different length of the agreement. And there is a fixed tariff, okay, what we call the solar tariff, that we will be billing on a monthly basis. So the monthly solar bill won't be a fixed amount, because every month the solar system will be generating a different amount of kilowatt hour depending on the weather conditions. In this case, usually the solar tariff that is offered in the UAE, depending on the setup, if it's a rooftop, if it's a carport, if depending on the technology, usually we have around 30 to 50% savings compared to the utility tariff. This is also great in a way that the CFOs can have this peace of mind that they have the cost of electricities that are locked for long duration, because it could be a variation in the utility tariff that no one has control of. But in this case, you have a better control of your power costs for long term. And as I mentioned before, you can focus on your core business and trust an expert solar business partner that is providing a performance guarantee. Next, please. So this table is just to illustrate a little bit how the saving calculation works, right? So we have usually, let's say 25 years, but usually the warranty on the solar panels are 30 years. But let's say the agreement is for 20 years and we consider the lifetime system is 25 years. The school will have a certain power consumption and pays a utility tariff. Let's say for DIWA, it's 44 fields. And before solar, let's say it pays 2.6 million dirham per year. Now, the solar will produce a certain amount depending on the capacity, of course, depending on the engineering that will be done. And there will be a solar tariff that will be fixed. So here, as you can see, we just multiply the kilowatt hour by YDE's tariff to define what will be the payment. And those are just estimation for now, right? Of course, the payment is done as per the meter. So it will be done as per actual, not as per a table, just to clarify. So the payment to a utility, there will still be a payment to be done to the utility provider, which is the remaining amount that the solar energy was not able to cover. Let's say during nighttime, or if there was any excess of energy that solar was not able to cover, right? And then the sum of it, the sum between YDE payment and the payment to the utility provider will give the total power cost after solar. The saving, the net saving, is the cost of the power before solar minus the power of the cost after solar. That will give you how much you can save on a yearly basis. After the 20th year, you will see that there's a column called O&M cost. Because the transfer of the ownership of the system will go to the school will have to pay some fee to cover the operation and maintenance costs, right? That's what is illustrated here. But obviously this table will be customized. So everything is customized to the school's need. Next, please. Yeah. So how do we operate the what we call the assets or all the solar plants? So through a sustainable asset management system, we can actually remotely monitor all the solar plants located not only in the UAE, but all the countries where we operate. And this tool, a monitoring tool, is used also to be able to predict the maintenance cycle, the preventive maintenance, but also the corrective maintenance. We're able to know exactly what's happening in each of our solar plants. And all this data information is also available through a what we call a meteor control platform, where actually a dashboard can be seen either through the phone from let's say, the head of operation, or through a screen. So it's an internet-based monitoring system. Yeah, this is just an example of a dashboard screen that one of our customer has decided to put at the entrance or the reception, but this can be customized, and there are different platforms. There are even some display systems that are specific to schools, that are more like kids-friendly displays, let's say. So Yellow Door Energy, this is to show you some of our solar projects that we build for some of our customers. We've got the American School of Dubai with 981 kilowatt peak. It is a very interesting project because it's a carport project, but on the parking. So it's on the second floor, right? So it's a parking on a building. Actually on their high school and on their primary school. We've got two sets. Very, very interesting project. We've got also 285 kilowatt peak system with English College, and this is what we call a ballast system. So it's a rooftop project on a concrete roof with a system that balances, basically just to stabilize the solar panels to make sure that they remain stable in case of wind or any weather condition. And the third project that we'll dive in a little bit more in detail, and we have our dear customer with us as a speaker, this SIST, Swiss International Scientific School, with a project of 784 kilowatt project, fully on the ground, on the parking. So it's a carport system. We have a short video, not commercial. If we have time, we can display it now. It basically a drone video of how the project at SIST look like, and they're more than happy to share the link with the audience. It's available on YouTube. Yeah, so I'd like to share some key lessons that we learned while executing those projects. 3 of them are in Dubai, but as we speak, we are also working on other projects in other Emirates. So some few things that are very specific to schools is that usually the site access is limited to some specific timing and school breaks, which makes it, from a project management perspective, a bit challenging, but of course not impossible. We also have additional HAC measures that need to be taken to make sure that this is, perfectly safe for the students. And also from a planning perspective, since we have a limited time to execute the project, as a way of example, for SIST, the construction timeline was to happen only during summer break. We had to make sure everything was finished by the time the student would arrive in September. So it's the planning of it is extremely important. I've also had the chance to share some of my thoughts with some students in some schools, and was really impressed by the way the students were engaged and curious about the solar system, wanting to understand how it works. And I'm sure Gul will guide us and take us through the educational benefits that has. And from a key lesson, extremely important to be mindful of the regulation, and also on the fact that they can change at any time. So the earlier we secure a permit for a solar plant, the best. Yeah, and just to conclude, thank you so much for inviting me to share my insight. If you are a school owner or operator and you would like to know more about our services or would like to have your evaluation done, please feel free to scan the QR code here, and it will take you to my contact details. Or you can just email us at gosolar@yellowdoorenergy.com. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Alex now.
Thank you, Sophia. It's an absolute pleasure to join this webinar organized by the Alliance of Sustainable Schools and to speak on a topic that's very dear to me and to our school. That's on the use of solar energy within the school. Just to start off, before we look into dive into the solar project, I think we've got schools and we've got institutions that are planning to execute solar project within your school. I think it's very key to understand that sustainability is not just a tick in the box anymore. It is the need of the hour, and I believe we all have a responsibility and a role to play. And that's where it's the Swiss International Scientific School, sustainability is very much part of the core value. And we have, right from the design of the building, with the amount of natural light that comes into the school, the energy consumption right from the very beginning has been of prime focus. And one of the visions that we had down the line within the school was to rely more on the renewable source of energy. And that is where we started off, looking at the options of how can we install solar panels within the school and make the best use out of what we've got from the environment. Moving on to the next slide, here is just a quick summary of a project timeline that we had. So while we initially agreed with the board that we would need to look into options with various developers and vendors in terms of who to partner with, that was a very key decision for us as a school. And I think among all the due diligence that we did, Yellow Door Energy were the most suitable partners that we could have for the school. And that is when in April 2022 was the very first time that we had received a proposal from Yellow Door Energy for the solar project. And soon after that, in March 2023, we had our agreement with Yellow Door Energy, which led into construction and installation of the panel during our summer break, which was a very short window. And in August 2023, last year, we completed the construction phase. And in October 2023, it was the month where we commissioned the solar project. So you would, some of you out of interest who are looking at the timeline, you would see that the timeline around the initial proposal to the execution of the agreement looks significantly longer. That's 11 months into signing of the agreement. And we had faced some operational challenges from the initial proposal. And it will benefit a lot of schools as well who are kind of going ahead with the plan, was in terms of the system capacity constraints that was put forward by the regulators. Our initial plan was for us to go full-fledged, go big, going for solar panels at our rooftops, even on our carport. However, we had faced some regulatory caps on the later months. And as Sophia mentioned previously, we could have probably done this project a bit earlier to get the solar panels up on our rooftop as well. So which kind of cap the capacity? So it's very important to understand that if you need to action into a plan for solar project, it's better to do that planning well ahead of time. And we had a capacity restriction and it was reduced by half. And then it moved to a strategic decision whether we wanted the solar panels on our rooftop or would it be on carport. And we decided to go ahead with the carport because it served a lot more benefit than what we would have on our rooftops. Moving on to the next slide, I just want to give you a summary of the solar project with some key highlights. So we have a system capacity of 780 kilowatt peak of output from our system. We have installed the solar on our carport. And one of the key things that I would like to highlight over here as well, we went for the leasing model that Sophia was mentioning, where there was no upfront capex cost that was involved. Because again, there would be business owners, there would be school owners in this webinar that would be very interested, and some in the past that I've come across that people have refrained from investing into these kind of projects because it is a significant investment. However, we have got developers like Yellow Door Energy that are giving us with feasible options where you can go for a long-term lease, where you would end up paying a subsidized rate than what you would pay to the authority, the local authority, that is DEWA here in Dubai. And that would be a win-win situation for both the developer and the partners as well, because you would end up having that savings through paying the subsidized rate. And over a period of the lease term, you would also end up, owning the asset as well. And it is also, there are many other benefits that Sophia has already highlighted. It's just not the investment part, but also the way it is maintained, the performance guarantee around it. All of that played a very important role in making sure that we opted for the lease option. In terms of the construction period, and I think Sophia had highlighted on this as well, as school, I think, especially for school that is fully operational, to carry out a project of this size is always a constraint. And I think that requires careful planning, and it also have to make sure that whatever you are executing within a timeline is very feasible, especially when you do it during the summer month. So we had a very tight timeline around this project, and I'm sure Sophia and the rest of the team had several meetings with me, reassuring me that the project timelines will be met within the 45 days window that we had. And I must say that that we worked together, and that was a successful project that we had completed. So that was without having any operational challenges, completing the project within a record time of 2 months, and that is, to be very precise, that was a window of 45 days. So there was a lot of planning that went behind. We did a lot of brainstorming as well. How are we going to execute this project, and what would be plan B if we face any constraints around it? But the good news is we were able to complete the project, and soon after the summer, when the kids and the staffs that we welcomed for the new academic year, it just felt like it was always there. So that was a great project in itself, and we are immensely proud as a school to take these initial steps before we go for bigger goals in terms of relying on more renewable source of energy. And finally, after the construction period, there are regulatory compliances, there are approvals in place, and we officially got our commissioning done on the 10th of October. We had a very grand opening as well around the solar project during the month of October as well. Moving on to the next slide. Again, all of you would be very well aware of the benefits of solar projects, but I would like to highlight some key aspects in terms of what was the drivers of the decision making for us. For us, again, as I mentioned, sustainability being a core value in the school, clean energy, reducing the school's carbon footprint is something that is not going to stop with the solar project, but it's an ongoing effort, and we are working towards it. In terms of even the real world learning tool that the students have, it was very important for us to have that tool available where students can interact and see how these solar panels are going to function, making it more visible for the kids as well. And that was one of the strategic decisions that we didn't go for the rooftop, but we went for the carport, so that every day when a student walks into the school, they have a complete visibility of the solar panels, and they are reminded about this every day. Again, speaking about electricity bills, as I mentioned, we had savings through the electricity bill going into a lease model at a subsidized rate. We also had a win-win situation. There was one of the survey among the parent surveys, we always had a request for a shaded car park for parents and visitors. And I think it was a win-win situation for us to find that solution, partnering with Yellow Door and having a solar panel installed. Just to give you a perspective of the amount of energy consumption that we have noticed and we have estimated that would be met with the current capacity would be up to 25% of the electricity needs. In terms of carbon emission, within the first year, we are projecting around 920 metric tons of carbon emission that we will be avoiding. It translates into, removing 205 cars from the roads and planting 15,000 trees. Again, when you look at the impact it creates in just a single year, it's really amazing to see what it can do if all the schools tap into the solar energy and also into renewable source of energy, by installing the solar project. Moving on to the next slide, I would just like to give you a highlight, and this is the real data that is from 10 months of operation that we had for the solar panels that have been installed. Year to date, we have produced solar energy of close to 1 million kilowatt per hour. In terms of carbon emission, we have so far managed to avoid 764 tons, and that's in 10 months of operation, equivalent to trees planted of 12,635, and already removing 170 cars off the road. For us to see that in real data was very significant, because it's great to see data with partners and with developers with estimated projection. But when you start looking at the real data that it starts producing, it's quite reassuring to see that, we are working towards the goal that we had as a school. I'll take this time to pass on to Gul, who is our assistant head of primary, and how we have embedded all of this to the curriculum and the education piece. And I'll pass on the stage to Gul. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you to TASS. Thank you to Anthony and Marshall for organizing this webinar and inviting us and giving us the opportunity to share what we are doing. Of course, we are partnering with Yellow Doors, and we have indeed had Sophia at the school already sharing her insight with some of our students through the means of an assembly. From our perspective, in terms of the educational element, first and foremost, we're an incredibly ambitious school and an ambitious student body. So right from the offset of the building, and as Alex mentioned, we are a sustainable school building, and we are really complying with those 5 elements that TASS are also imploring. So our building, our education, our food, our uniform, as well as our transport, focusing specifically on the building and providing that key environment where students can feel inspired to be a part of the learning environment, where they come in and from every floor and the sides of the buildings, and from the minute that they enter the school building, they can see the solar panels. They are aware of the generation of a renewable energy source. And of course, aligning our SDG goals, which we have through our IB framework. We are an IB through school. So in terms of the energy sources, we are focusing on SDG 7, 4, and 13 in terms of the affordable and clean energy. When our students see that there is an action that we are taking as a school, as a governing body, and we are promoting the options for them to learn more, and also creating future aspirations for their learning, for research opportunities, and community outreach. Now, we are coming up to a year celebrating our 1,366 solar panels that we have. And with that celebration of the year, our students have played a key role, as well as our teachers within this school, from the project launch, from being part of the assemblies, from the learning of renewable energy sources, and of course, solar power being one of the key renewable energy sources with the location that we are in globally. Now, in terms of going forward and what our aspirations are for the future, there are so many. Research opportunities being one of them, ensuring that there are community outreach options for our community to learn more. We will often have videos or infographics and some of the dashboard analysis that we can share with our students upon them entering the school. And of course, we want to take that further for the opportunity for our students to analyze the data, to understand what it means, to understand the curves, the changes in the generation of the amount of energy that's generated daily. And so the comparison chart that you just saw that we had on the previous slide shows our students just that. So they can see the peaks, the times of day, and the comparison through the months as well. So it's showing them real life data and, of course, continually raising awareness about the agenda. And as Balsam mentioned, with regards to the local agenda of post-COP28, but also the UAE's vision for a greener climate and greener energy production. So that is what we are hoping to inspire in our students, and we see them incredibly inspired and dedicated. And it's creating an awe and wonder from the minute that they walk into the school building, which for us is a real win, and we hope to continue to capitalize on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gul. Now we're opening up to the floor for any questions, any further thoughts or feedback. I know that there was a question in the chat box from Ahmed on, I think it probably is for Yellow Door Energy, on can the client invest in the assets expenses in the CapEx option to reduce the rate? Sophia, I'll hand that over to you.
Sure. So Ahmed, yes, this is absolutely possible. You could go CapEx, as I mentioned before. However, the return on investment you would have in taking that cash and investing it into your core business would be much higher than the return on investment you would have in just investing in solar. Plus, as I mentioned, if you do invest in solar yourself, you will have to take all the burden of the operation risks that come with it. So yes, it is an option, and some schools have actually opted for the CapEx option, but it's a decision to make from an operational and financial perspective.
Thank you, Sophia. Anthony, sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, if I can jump in. I interpreted the question to mean, is co-investment in the CapEx an option in order to reduce the electricity rate? I may be interpreting it incorrectly, but anyway, that's another question. But could you address that question as well? Would you if the school wanted to come up with 20% of the CapEx, would you co-invest with the school in the solar, and would they get a reduced rate on the lease?
Yes, that could be possible. However, again, I don't think it will benefit them to actually put the CapEx now, because it's like working with the bank. It's better to leverage, right? But if it makes sense to the school, that could be possible, but not recommended.
All right, any other questions?
I have a question for Alex. Could you elaborate a little bit, please, on the main considerations that the school was debating during the decision, before the decision was made to go ahead with the solar project? What were your main concerns?
I think, again, going back to the operational challenge of executing the project, I think one of the key aspects around the decision making was, we are a fully functional school. We have got close to, when we executed this project, we had close to 2,200 students already on campus. And doing a project of this size for many mature schools would take a lot of careful planning in terms of the project timeline, also taking into consider the health and safety aspects of the project, and just making sure that there is the least interruption. I think for schools that are startup, I think it's a great initiative. That's no-brainer for them. It is much easier for them to opt for a solar installation. But for schools that are fully operational, to find that timeline within that summer break to execute the project is quite key, and that requires a lot of careful planning. And that was where our partnership with Yellow Door, and Sophia can reiterate on this one as well, that we had several number of meetings where we had gone back and forth with the project timelines. We agreed to do a step-up model on these projects of how to go ahead with the projects and so on. So I think one of the biggest barriers, especially for a mature school that is fully operational, would be the execution timeline. Even if you consider the rooftop as well, it is not a very feasible option unless it's not interrupting the school operation side of things. You still need to have the projects to be carried out during the summer break time. Just to answer your question.
Great. I have another question, and maybe I'll direct this question to Balsam. Given what we've heard from everybody today, the fact that the UAE is a great place in terms of available solar, it's possible to implement a project on the building with no upfront capital, and there are all these benefits in terms of savings on the electricity bill and so on. Why is it that we haven't seen a lot more take up of solar on buildings in general, never mind schools, but just buildings in general? What's your perspective on that, Balsam? It seems like a no-brainer, but it's not happening. It's only been happening very slowly or to a small degree.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Anthony. So I think the two key things here is awareness and regulations. The more that we start seeing this part of the regulations, we have started seeing it a bit from Dubai Municipality and Al Safat regulation for villas. But the more that we see it widespread, and the more that we see it, and that we see sessions similar to this one, awareness sessions, events, etc., and regulatory compliance requirements, this is where we're going to start seeing much more of the solar integration within buildings in the UAE, let alone in the region at a broader scale.
And maybe anyone from a school in the audience could also, if they have reflections on, if you're thinking about putting solar on your school building, what is holding you back? I wonder if we can open that to the discussion. Why haven't more of the schools on this call gone ahead with the solar opportunity? Any thoughts from those on the call?
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Please go ahead.
I'm Dr. Shaida Shaheen from English Language Grammar School, from English Language School, Dubai. So, sir, my question is that how many watts of solar panels are required to run 60 ACs at school if we try to apply it in our school? My question is from Sophia.
The question is, how many solar panels are required to run
60
ACs at school?
60 air conditioners.
Yes.
Right.
60 ACs. So I won't have the exact number on top of my head because each AC has a different load. And the way it works, or the way solar works, is that we actually generate electricity that is connected to your main, what we call MDB, so on your low voltage room. So that electricity can be used for any use that is located in that MDB, right? So if it's cooling, or if you have a specific cabinet just for your AC, that we would need to know what is that load. This is what we call the load. That is why I ask for the single line diagram. This is where you see actually the kilowatt. So I would need to know on your 60 ACs how many kilowatt each have, and if those are all connected, how are they connected? Are they all connected through the same MDB or separate MDBs? So unfortunately, I don't have a figure to share, but please feel free to contact me offline, and more than happy to do the math.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Shahid.
Maybe I would just add to what Sophia just said and highlight really the percentage that Alex has presented as to solar offsetting 25% of their annual energy consumption, which is a significantly big number for schools. And to Shahida's question on the cooling, now, while cooling does represent about maybe 40% of your energy use intensity, but a 25% contribution from solar PV as a source of clean energy is quite significant. And schools tend to be low on energy consumption, generally because they're not process-driven facilities. So, and they do have large rooftops. So considering solar is an important and interesting measure and strategy, as validated by Alex and Gul in their presentation as well. So I hope that also adds to Sophia's point on the cooling, the school, and the solar energy yields and offset from that.
Thank you so much. Anthony, anything to add, or should we go to closing remarks?
No, I think if there's no other questions, I think we'll wrap up. Let me take a moment to thank our speakers, Balsam from Emirates Green Building Council, Sophia from Yellow Door Energy, and Alex and Gul from Swiss International Scientific School for their presentations today and their insights. Also to thank my colleague, Michelle, who helped put this together, and to all of you attendees for joining in and participating today. We hope we provided you with some inspiration and insights into the practicalities of solar in schools. And if anyone on the call is interested to join a TASS or find out more about our mission, I posted our email address in the chat. This is one of a series of webinars that we run every year, and we look forward to having you with us on the next webinar, which will be a presentation from a environmental school in California. Thank you all very much, and have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.